before women's soccer was global, one woman changed the game forever. But what you think you know about Mia Hamm is just the carefully crafted public image they've wanted you to see. What I'm about to tell you about was never meant to be public knowledge. The soccer establishment has worked tirelessly to keep these revelations buried for decades. Between you and me, the Mia Hamm story contains secrets so explosive that several major sports networks refuse to air them. My industry source, someone who worked directly with Hamm during her rise to fame, has finally broken their silence after signing a confidentiality agreement that lasted 20 years. The truth about how Mia Hamm transformed from a shy, unassuming girl to the most dominant force in women's sports history is far more complicated than the fairy tale version we've all been fed. The struggles, the sacrifices, the behind closed doors battles that nearly ended her career before it truly began. They don't want this getting out, but Mia Hamm was actually rejected from her first major team. The coaches said, and I quote from internal documents I've obtained, lacks the physical presence to compete at elite levels. Can you imagine? The woman who would go on to score 158 international goals was once deemed not good enough. But that rejection sparked something dangerous in her. What the tabloids don't know is that Hamm developed training methods so intense that her own teammates complained to management. My source revealed that Hamm would train in complete isolation for hours after official practice ended, pushing her body to breaking points that sports scientists now consider potentially harmful. She wasn't just dedicated, she was obsessed in ways that bordered on self-destruction. But that's nothing compared to what happened next. In 1991, just before the Women's World Cup that would launch her into the spotlight, Hamm suffered an injury so severe that doctors advised her to withdraw from the tournament. The public story was minor discomfort, the truth. A stress fracture that required her to inject powerful painkillers before every match. She played the entire tournament essentially on one leg, something the team doctor later called the most reckless thing I've ever facilitated in my medical career. The Soccer Federation has spent millions ensuring this next revelation stays buried. Mia Hamm was nearly cut from the 1996 Olympic team. Yes, the same Olympics where she led America to gold. My source showed me internal team documents that reveal a power struggle so intense that several senior officials threatened to resign if Hamm remained on the roster. The dispute wasn't about her talent. It was about her increasingly vocal demands for equal treatment and pay for female athletes. Between you and me, these confrontations became so heated that during one closed-door meeting, Hamm allegedly told the Federation president, "You can either be on the right side of history, or you can be remembered as the person who tried to stop it." That statement sent shockwaves through the organization, with one executive writing in a private memo I've obtained, "Hamm has become too powerful to control." The truth finally exposed is that Mia Hamm wasn't just fighting for victories on the field. She was waging an all-out war against a system designed to keep women's sports in the shadows. And she was willing to risk everything, including her own career, to change it. But here's where it gets truly shocking. Remember that iconic sports bra celebration after scoring the winning penalty kick in the 1999 World Cup? What my sources have confirmed is that moment was actually a calculated act of rebellion. Hamm and teammate Brandi Chastain had made a secret pact before the tournament to create an unforgettable image that would force the media to cover women's sports differently. The spontaneous celebration we all witnessed was planned weeks in advance as a deliberate statement about female athletes owning their bodies and their accomplishments. The aftermath was more explosive than even they anticipated. My industry contact revealed that major sponsors threatened to pull millions in advertising over what they called inappropriate imagery, until Hamm personally called the CEO of each company and said something so compelling that they not only stayed but increased their investment. What did she say in those calls? My source was in the room for one and told me Hamm calmly stated, "You can either be part of the biggest growth opportunity in sports history, or you can explain to your shareholders why you walked away from it." They've been hiding the fact that Hamm's influence extended far beyond the pitch. When Nike initially offered her an endorsement deal, they presented her with pink cleats. What happened next has become legend within Nike's corporate offices, but was never made public. Hamm refused to sign unless they treated her exactly like their male athletes. Same design team, same marketing budget, same performance standards. One executive reportedly said, "She's not asking to be treated like a female athlete. She's demanding to be treated like Ronaldo." What the world doesn't know is that in 2001, at the absolute peak of her powers, Mia Hamm nearly walked away from soccer entirely. My source provided me with letters Hamm wrote to her closest confidants describing a crisis of purpose, so profound that she had mentally prepared her retirement announcement. The catalyst: learning that the women's national team players were being paid just 2% of what their male counterparts received, despite generating comparable revenue. 3 days before she planned to announce her retirement, something changed her mind. And this is perhaps the most closely guarded secret of all. Hamm received a handwritten letter from a girl in rural Alabama who wrote, "Before I saw you play, I didn't know women were allowed to be powerful." Those words, not money, not fame, not even championship trophies, convinced her to continue her fight. My source tells me that Hamm kept that letter laminated in her sports bag for the remainder of her career. The transformation of women's soccer from niche sport to global phenomenon wasn't an accident or natural evolution. It was the result of a meticulously orchestrated campaign led by Hamm behind the scenes. Sports marketing executives have told me that Hamm would regularly reject lucrative endorsement deals if the companies weren't also investing in grassroots women's sports programs. One major brand's representative told me she wasn't interested in being a celebrity. She was building an entire ecosystem for women's sports when nobody else could even see it. But that's nothing compared to what happened when she decided to retire. When Mia Hamm announced her retirement in 2004, the public narrative was that she wanted to focus on family. The truth that's been carefully suppressed. Hamm had presented U.S. soccer with a comprehensive plan to revolutionize women's professional leagues, including equal marketing budgets, comparable facilities, and revenue-sharing models identical to men's sports. When they rejected her proposal, she made the stunning decision to walk away at the height of her influence. My industry source revealed to me that in her final meeting with Federation officials, Hamm made a prediction that sent chills through the room. She said, "You think women's soccer needs you. In 10 years, you'll be begging to be associated with what we've built." The executive who heard those words told my source it was like being threatened by someone who could see the future. What they've been hiding all these years is that Hamm's retirement wasn't an ending, it was a strategic redeployment. She systematically channeled her influence into building infrastructure for the next generation. The Mia Hamm Foundation wasn't just a typical athlete charity. It was the command center for a movement designed to outlast her playing career. Between you and me, when the U.S. women's national team filed their landmark equal pay lawsuit in 2019, few people knew that Hamm had been consulting with the players for years, providing both strategic guidance and financial support. One player involved in the case told my source, "Without Mia's blueprint, we wouldn't have known where to begin." She mapped out this battle 2 decades ago. The soccer establishment doesn't want you to connect these dots, but the evidence is undeniable. The explosion of women's soccer globally, from record-breaking World Cup viewership to professional league expansion, follows almost exactly the trajectory Hamm outlined in private strategy documents from the early 2000s that my source has verified. But here's the revelation that changes everything we thought we knew about Mia Hamm. Despite her 158 international goals, her 2 World Cup victories, her Olympic gold medals, and her revolution of women's sports, Mia Hamm considers herself a failure. Yes, you heard that correctly. In a private conversation recorded just last year, Hamm admitted to a former teammate, "We moved the needle, but not far enough. Not fast enough." This stunning admission reveals that her ambitions were far greater than anyone realized. She wasn't just trying to improve women's soccer. She was attempting to completely dismantle and rebuild the entire global sports paradigm. Now that you know the truth, here's what happens next. The Mia Hamm story isn't over. It's evolving into something even more powerful. My sources indicate that Hamm is currently assembling an unprecedented coalition of female athletes across multiple sports, major investors, and media companies to launch something in 2023 that will make the previous revolution look like a warm-up exercise. 3 former executives from major sports networks have confirmed to me that Hamm has secured commitments for what could become the largest investment in women's sports in history. The details are being guarded like state secrets, but one insider described it as the complete reimagining of how women's sports are produced, distributed, and monetized. What makes this particularly explosive is that several current sponsors of men's sports are reportedly preparing to reallocate significant portions of their budgets to Hamm's initiative. My source says, the numbers being discussed would fundamentally alter the economic landscape of professional sports as we know it. The question isn't whether Mia Hamm changed women's soccer, it's whether we're prepared for how she's about to change the entire concept of sports as we know it. The shy girl from Selma, Alabama, who was once told she wasn't physical enough to compete, is now positioned to execute the final phase of a plan decades in the making. And here's where you need to pay very close attention. The revolution Hamm started isn't just about sports. It's about power. It's about who controls the narratives and economics of how we view female achievement. It's about dismantling systems so deeply entrenched that most people can't even see them. As one insider put it to me, Mia wasn't playing soccer. She was playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers. But will her most ambitious move yet succeed or backfire catastrophically? The sports power brokers who have controlled billions in revenue for decades aren't surrendering without a fight. I've learned that emergency meetings have been taking place among major league commissioners, specifically to address what one internal memo called the Hamm situation. What happens in the next 6 months could completely transform not just women's sports, but the entire infrastructure of professional athletics globally. And it all traces back to that one woman who was told she wasn't good enough, who then proceeded to redefine what was possible. The story of Mia Hamm isn't just about what she accomplished on the field. It's about what she's orchestrated behind the scenes for decades. And if my sources are correct, we're about to witness the culmination of a master plan that began with a rejected athlete and may end with the most significant redistribution of power and wealth in sports history. Is the world ready for what comes next? Subscribe now, because in our next video, I'll be revealing the confidential documents that outline exactly how Hamm's secret coalition plans to execute what they're calling the final phase, and the 5 global sports organizations that may not survive it. Estimated duration: 8.2 minutes.